Is-
Yeah.
There he is. Hey, what's up?
Oh, just chilling out, drinking my morning coffee.
Me too. Me too. Love it. I was
Oh,
just going through some house cleaning really quick. I was telling people they can find all of our episodes everywhere and check out the live stream every Sunday morning, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Check out Adam Has a Beard because he had his second annual spiritual conference. I was a part of the first one. I was snubbed for the second one for better talent. So, yay. Congratulations to him.
awesome.
And a shout out to my hosts from Inspirations Beyond Disabilities who are all gathered together in Miami having a great time. And I love that. You know, they didn't even know each other before I started the podcast. And like day one, they just became best friends. So I'm really excited for them and all that. How are you doing? How was your week?
Oh man, it's been busy.
Yeah.
I've been basically doing two jobs at once.
Mm,
Um, and it's exhausting, but my hope is that as my organization goes through the hiring process, they ultimately end up considering me. So
okay.
in the end, one way or the other, it'll be nice when some of this is finally handled and over.
It's amazing. I think the whole country per person is just going through transition. Everybody I talk to is moving or changing or doing something. And I wonder if that's because they feel confidence to do that, you know what I mean? Or because COVID is ending, or if it's just the way the world is, you know?
I would say COVID's not ending, but the safety is improving.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so people aren't feeling like they have the reins on themselves like they've had in the past in order to you know pursue certain things. I was actually talking with a friend about that, just because it seems like right now every state is now getting to the point of they're hurting for people to work.
Right. Yeah.
And that's one of those things where it's like the like the whole I'm not the left, I'm not the right.
Mm-hmm.
On one hand, to me, like a lot of this made sense just in that, until we could get vaccines out to people and make sure that, we were doing everything we can in that regard, everything reopening just didn't seem as safe. It wasn't time yet.
Yeah.
Mathematically speaking, I still don't think it's time, but we're now at a tipping point in the vaccine race where we're getting to where there's going to be more supply than there is demand,
Yep.
and really it's the same way with jobs. And so one of the things that I'm starting to tell people as much as I can is like, right now there's a lot of great paying jobs out there that are available that are above minimum wage, and if you are not getting yourself vaccinated and trying to get your foot in the door in some of these positions that maybe you didn't think you had a chance at before, but because they're hurting you do now,
Right.
this is your chance to get in and get ahead of the fact that pretty much I imagine that every state is going to cut off the federal unemployment aid by the end of July.
Yeah. It's
As
gonna have to end at some point.
well, and it's scheduled to end, I think, at the end of September.
Mm.
So like getting those high paying jobs while they're available, getting the vaccines now that they're readily available. I mean, like, this is your chance to take what has been probably the worst 15, 16 months of our lives. And, this is your chance to turn it around on its head and say, you know what, I'm going to move onward and upward.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But sometimes you need to get your foot in the door, and a lower wage at a great company is better than a higher rate wage at a crappy company. So people should consider that, you know. And I want to say to companies, maybe you should consider hiring more disabled people because we are definitely willing to work, you know.
Exactly. And that's just it, is that, companies and people need to figure out what that looks like.
Hmm.
For me and my organization, my organization focuses on community and that's, it's not that I didn't have the chance to work at larger organizations given where I live,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't align with my value set and what I want to do. I
Exactly.
know I could be making I know that if I wanted to, I could make a few phone calls and probably get my foot in the door somewhere else.
Mm,
But that's not what I want because that's not who I've ever been. I like to focus on, the immediate needs of community, and that's where I feel the best when I'm in my work environment, because
nice.
I really don't feel like I'm working. So, that's
Okay.
just me personally.
I like that. I mean, people have asked me why stay in the middle? Why criticize everybody and alienate your audience? And that's my values is I'm always trying to bring reason to the argument. I want to be the middleman, the referee, the person going, "Wow, like no." So I like I would rather get what we're doing with my morals than sensationalize something and go with the trends just to get listens and go with people's preset opinions. I'm here to help you question your opinions, you know what I mean? Even if
Oh
you're
yeah.
right, everything should be tested in theory, and if you're right, then it should hold up to my arguments. Because I don't make the smartest arguments. You know what I mean?
Well, and even still, if you're not questioning the things around you,
Mm-hmm.
then you open yourself up to just general groupthink, and that's how you get into where we're at currently, where groupthink is so pervasive, but the groupthink that's now prevalent is just absolutely fucking nuts.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, we've surrounded ourselves with people who just readily and inherently agree with us. We shut out voices that don't agree with us. We we look for the things that we believe to be true, not whether or not, you can test them to find out whether they are true or not, in fact.
Right.
And so you just end up creating this sounding board of, I'm right, until somebody, shows up with a set of information that says, no, in fact, you're not. And then people feel like they're physically attacked. And it's like, this is why, and it's why, as scientists, when people say trust the science, we go, ooh, it's a process,
Mm.
and it very much is it's right until it isn't.
Well, the thing is Republicans spent 4 years owning the libs and having a great time with it.
Oh
And
yeah.
now the libs are having a great time retaliating. And so you're not getting these conversations without tones, without argumentative tones or sarcastic tones or you're just stupid for what you think tones. We're not worried. We just want to hurt each other. We don't want to be
Mhm.
like, hey, come here, sit down. Guess what? You might be wrong. You might be right. Part of it might be right. You might have a nugget of truth in there, but let's talk about that. We don't do that. We're all like, haha, we got you.
It's all about sound bites for our respective news organizations and
Mm,
Twitter clips that people can then retweet and share far and wide. It's not about, if it were discussions on the actual policies and actually about compromise, there's plenty of things that could be done
mhm.
where, the right gets what they want, the left gets what they want, and the people on the fringes are pissed because they don't get what they want.
Yeah, I've never gotten what I want.
Dude, I'm not even fringe and I don't even get what I want, so.
Exactly. And I was just telling my friend the other day, I was like, what if black people aren't the problem? What if it's the people telling you that the black people are the problem? Like,
Right.
I don't know why we're siding with politicians over other Americans when, as a voice, we drastically outnumber the politicians, you know?
Well, it goes back to that inherent discussion, of we feel safe within our own party and we think that our own party is right.
Hmm.
And when our own party isn't in power, then the government is inherently evil and it can't be trusted and this, that, and the other. And I'm over here in the middle going, what if neither of them can be inherently trusted?
Well, exactly. But my point is, even in the Democrats, they have a progressive caucus, a black caucus, um, moderate caucus, a conservative caucus. And so anytime you get a group, eventually that group is going to eat itself because nobody is pure enough to be in the original group. And so you have splinter groups. And there's this big thing called intersectionality, which means what you deal with, I also deal with. I might be white and disabled. You might be, Jacob Blake is black and disabled. So there's an intersectionality there. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
LGBTIA has an A in it, which stands for asexual or ally. There's an intersectionality there. I'm an ally, so I support them and they should be supporting me and we should be supporting immigrant rights because we're humans and there's an intersectionality to all of that.
Hmm.
And I think what people get confused is there's politics, which is running for office. There's governing, which is actually representing the people that elected you, and then there's legislation, which is creating things based on all of that. But
Hmm.
politics doesn't have to rule the day. A Republican doesn't have to say, because of my politics, I'm not voting to fund the Capitol Police. He should say, politics aside, is this reasonable? Yes, we should fund the Capitol Police. It's not a partisan issue, and we have to stop adding um, politics to everything. It's not a seasoning that goes with everything. It makes a lot of stuff taste bad, and we need to pull it
Hmm.
out of our recipes and then have these salt and pepper conversations.
Well, and, yeah, but it goes back to the whole fact that everybody's looking for a sound clip of them owning the libs or
Hmm.
owning the GOP or it's
Yeah.
it's really frustrating because the number of times people think that they're owning the opposite side, I can literally look at the argument and in about 5 seconds absolutely destroy it either way.
Either way. Yeah.
And it
And
doesn't,
I can too by just going,
or even just taking a second to think about it's like, wow, you really just alienated about half the people because you think that one specific way should be the entire
Hmm.
way for the country rather than going, okay, yeah, this works for me and it works for a lot of people, but this way works for them and a lot of other people. And my point really wasn't much of a point at all.
Right. You're looking at different topological maps. I swear. It's
Yeah,
a weather map over migration patterns of birds, and we're both going, look, they're totally different. And we're like, yeah, but it's the same planet, you know?
exactly. That's what's so frustrating about it is that
Hmm.
you know I don't have the brain capacity to deal with conspiracy theorists on either side. I don't
Mm.
have the brain capacity to deal with people that are looking for a sound bite or a news clip. It just isn't it just
Yeah,
it goes to that whole question of why are you listening? Are you listening to learn? Or are you listening to respond? And
exactly.
and most people are just listening just enough to be able to make a counterpoint
Hmm.
that may or may not be well within the realm of what is even happening.
Right.
That's
Hashtag conversations.
yeah, and that's just it. It's so crazy to me. It's like, you've got one side that sits down and talks about you know, how they don't understand why, black people aren't supporting them more, you know,
Hmm.
when you look at, like you were saying, intersectionality, you've got people who are devoutly religious and black, so why does that mean that they should vote liberal? Like
Exactly.
that might not necessarily fit with their worldview.
Hmm.
Just because someone's a person of color, that doesn't mean that they're a liberal, and that's kind of a really fucked up way of thinking
Yeah,
if that's how you go.
you can strip them away just on the abortion rights. It's conservatives believe that and churchgoers believe that. So you have this intersectionality there on a subject that is very interesting to me. You know what I mean? I'm
Mm.
not studied up on it, but there's bills to change the law to prevent abortions after 15 weeks instead of 20 weeks.
Mhm.
And I can't help but think they say that 20 weeks is because at that point the fetus is viable. But what if we learned in the past 40 years that the fetus is then viable at 15 weeks? If there's um, evidence of that, then
Well,
we
with
should consider talking about that. You know what I
well
mean?
with
Instead of just saying it's an arcane law and they're trying to go back to zero when it's 15 weeks.
Well, and so here's what you have. You also have to take in the to account the advancements in medical science. I
Hmm.
mean, they've created the artificial womb where you can. They're thinking that they can actually go from conception to birth
Right.
in an artificial womb. So does that mean that any fertilized egg is now considered viable?
Well, that's a discussion to have, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and that's just but and this is where it just gets so crazy and so wonky because just because something's viable, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be well taken care of. The idea that this is, where I always pull up Futurama. There's no consensus that life is important, because
Right.
when you look at any of it, when you look at any of the arguments out there, you have a bunch of people saying, you know, yeah, all lives matter, and they support the death penalty.
Hmm.
They support what was the other one I was going to say? Oftentimes they'll end up supporting the police when they straight up execute someone over something that's
Yeah.
not a death penalty offense.
They're happy to pull you off insurance. They're happy to keep disabled people in poverty. They're happy to keep gay people from adopting children that they insist are born.
They're happy to keep people from being able to obtain benefits that keep people alive.
Yeah.
So like you've got all of this all lives matter stuff,
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
that's
They also
entirely.
they also support gun rights, which kill people all the time.
And so it's like, okay, well, that's bullshit. And then you have people being pro-choice, and then, the moment someone says, okay, well, I choose to believe that abortion is terrible,
Mm-hmm.
suddenly they're all pissed. It's like, okay, well, where was the pro-choice in this matter? Because just because someone doesn't think, it boils down to people like to put their nose in everybody else's business until someone puts
Yep.
their and people like to make rules for everybody else until that rule comes back on them.
That's right.
You see it constantly. Abortion is bad. Knocked up their mistress. You need to go get an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even tell you the number of people that I know personally that got pregnant when they were in college, and
Mm-hmm.
their very conservative family told them to get an abortion, despite being very much pro-life. And I'm like, what kind of fucked reasoning is that? Like, how can
Right.
you call yourself pro-life, and then the moment that something turns on your head, you're screaming, get an abortion? That doesn't make any sense. Meanwhile, you know, if you've got those same groups of people that say that life needs to come to term and needs to be delivered, but the moment it exits the vaginal canal, they don't give a shit about whether or not it's fed, clothed, cared for, until it's like until that life is completely in the gutter
Right.
because of any number of issues ranging from neglect to drug abuse to God knows what else. And so when you tell me all lives matter, but you don't want to ensure all of these rights to make sure that life has a not I'm not saying an equal opportunity of outcome. I'm talking just an equal possibility in opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It makes absolutely no sense to say all lives matter and then act in the way that they do. It doesn't make any sense at all. But I will say that I do know people who really are, quote unquote, all lives matter. And it's, they're against the death penalty. They don't like the fact that cops are killing people. They don't believe that abortion is right, but they do believe in making sure that babies that are born are well cared for, well taken care of, that I mean, it is
Mm-hmm.
possible. It's just that we've seen it used as a rallying cry by people who only care about all lives mattering as long as it's screaming at Black Lives Matter. And that's just the fucking weirdest thing ever.
It is the weirdest thing, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'll kill a bug. Like, I saw a commercial and this lady was like, "I'm vegan, but I love meat, so I order my meat from assholeanimals.com."
Wait,
So,
what? That's like me saying I'm a vegan on my annual cheat year. That doesn't make a goddamn bit of sense.
right. Well, I mean, you can eat animals as long as they're assholes first.
Look, I mean,
I always say that if I had to kill an animal to eat meat, I would be vegan because I just couldn't do it. But I'm happy that somebody else does it for me, you know?
and that's and you know and being somebody that's culled more animals than most people will ever count in their life.
Mm,
It's I can definitely see why for some people it's a struggle. I mean, even for me, it's there's an emotion behind taking an animal, and there
Mm,
really should be.
yeah,
As someone who's raised cattle, as somebody who goes hunting, if you feel absolutely nothing except joy, then you're not doing it right.
right.
Like understanding that beauty of nature and understanding that if you are in the path that they're all God's creatures,
Mhm.
it's still a very emotional event, and it should be,
It should
because
be.
that shows that you have some humanity left, in you, to have empathy for things outside of the human race. It's why we have animals. It's why we have pets that become family members.
Right?
Because if a dog's just a dog, then why the fuck do you own one? My dog isn't just a dog, she's my family member.
Mm.
And it's when she's not feeling well, I'm taking care of her and I'm worried about her. And when
Aw.
she is feeling well, she's an asshole and she drives me crazy and I love her. But then again, I'm sure that most people who know me say I'm an asshole and I drive them crazy, but they love me too.
Animals are like their owners, right?
Hmm.
I love that.
So it's,
Okay.
we've got to get back to the policy of being humans first,
Mhm.
and disagreeing over what we think is the best way to take care of people. And knowing, like, I have had this discussion with multiple people. Like, for me, I care about people. And when I see that, that people are complaining about the fact that they think the government is inherently racist and that the government is inherently out to get them and hurt people, it doesn't make any sense to me then why your solution would be let's add more government. Because it's like, that'd be like, man, I'm stepping on all of these Legos and it really fucking hurts. So I think the best way to fix the problem is to pour some more Legos on the floor so that way, it's all spread out. No, that doesn't
I
make any sense.
That goes to
And
my major misconception about everything, is that from libertarian to progressives, we all say we want less government involvement. But the truth is we want more government, we want less bureaucracy. And that's why we have elections, is to get rid of politicians and bring in representatives. And that's the process. That's the washing process of democracy, is taking
mhm,
the bad out. And then you need to rotate those people, because once they settle in, they become bureaucrats, and bureaucrats
mhm,
want the status quo. They don't want change. And so there's red tape for everything. And so I don't think it's government. There's not an agency I would want to get rid of. There's just an agency I think could be run leaner and better.
I think they all could be run leaner.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference. you know, like, I don't have issues with programs that serve human needs. I have
Right.
issues with the number of people that are in those programs taking a cut of the money, and
Yes.
then the humans that absolutely need those services being told that their services are getting cut back because of X, Y, and Z, when the reality is that they've hired more people to do more things.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not necessarily everything that needs it doesn't all need administration, and that's the problem. It
Right.
doesn't all need bureaucracy.
And a lot of it could be merged into some bigger, offices. They don't all have to be these little things that just pop up because there's an issue. It could be a think tank that disperses after a while and folds into another agency. So there's a lot of stuff about bureaucracy that I can't stand. But I'm going to always say I love government because I hate Vladimir Putin.
Right.
So that's just me. And I think even Liz Cheney saying she wants smaller government, what she means is she just wants it to run better. It's like a car with too many extra parts that's causing gas inefficiency, when you could just take some of that stuff and repurpose it and make it a better vehicle.
Absolutely. And that's just it, is that there's a lot out there that could be redone.
Hmm.
I'm sure, like, even for you, like, if you were to look at the inefficiencies in the Medicare system, the fact of the
Yeah.
matter is that there probably could be more money available
Hmm.
to actually serving the people.
Yeah.
but it's being spent in all the ways that you can figure out and how to deny people
Right.
their medical claims or whatever. And so, it's kind of one of those weird things where it's like,
Yeah,
I get why everybody wants more government, but the way in which it gets done is completely backwards, you know?
sure. The people in the offices, they have to justify their salary, so they're always trying to do something whether it makes sense or not. That's the problem, is the bureaucrats within the positions. I don't wanna get rid of Medicare, but I also don't wanna give it to 330 million Americans when it's broken, you know? When it's
Right.
running this way, I'm not gonna sell a car if it's not tuned up first, you know?
No, it's and that's what people don't understand is that,
Mhm.
if you're on Medicare and you're trying to get all this, you have issues and you need care, you know, the people that are on Medicare, need to be able to tell people who think that Medicare for all is the way to go and sit down and go,
Yeah.
look, no, you don't want this. We don't want this right now. We don't have any choice though. That's the
Right.
difference.
And some of my most popular tweets are about that. Don't give Medicare to all until it's fixed by all. You know what I mean? Fixed for
Exactly.
all.
And that's just it is that the moment that you did that, you probably pissed off a bunch of people on the left. They're like, well, how could you not want Medicare for all? It's like,
Yeah.
I can't get the fucking care that I need on Medicare for all. So
Hmm.
why do I want to put a bunch of other people in probably worse scenarios than they already are currently?
And so what that does is it just pushes. Donald Trump's plan was an a la carte insurance where you go for what you want. So if everybody gets the base Medicare, it's like getting the base Hulu, which does absolutely nothing for you. It makes you want to upgrade. And then every insurance company is going to be a specialty insurance, which can charge more. So when you then have a condition Medicare won't cover, your 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 prostate is going to be an elective. Your bladder issues are going to be an elective. The lump in your chest, the cancer is going to become a specialty. And Medicare is only going to cover sniffles and coughs. You know what I mean? They'll degrade it to a point to where it does nothing, and then all of a sudden you're paying for the specialty insurances, which everybody can afford or get for free just by being in office for 5 years. You know?
Hmm. So it just, it's one of those things. Like I get why people like the idea of universal health coverage, and I get why they say Medicare for all. Until you
Hmm.
actually understand what Medicare looks like now, you shouldn't want that.
Right. I mean, yes, you will be able to walk into a hospital and get served, but then depending on the cost of that, you might have to pay out of pocket for the next 6 months until you hit the other side of the donut hole, and then you have to pay 25% of everything after that. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. You can't go get healthcare when your doctor is charging $300 and up for a visit. You can't have that many visits when it only covers up to $3,000 a year. And when you add your prescriptions into that and your doctor visits and then an MRI that might cost $1,500 or an emergency room visit or an urgent care visit, you're fucked.
Hmm. And so that's where, sitting down and looking at it objectively, it's like, what would be, how would Medicare for all function better if
Mhm.
you were to change things up? Like, what functions could you change to make that $3,000 go further? And we've talked about that.
Yeah. My radical idea is to fold the VA into Medicare and just have a Part V. You know what I mean? But that's my radical thing. $360 billion a year on veteran care. Fold it into Medicare. But that's me, you know.
And my radical idea is that we should essentially do away with it, have what would be a modified HSA system where we give
Hmm.
you three grand, and then you pay cash for whatever services you need. And there's a lot of doctors' offices out there now that are giving discounts on the fact that you're paying cash. So what your $3,000 did before now goes even further because you don't have to pay the same amount out of pocket.
I like that.
And that's
If the prices go down, then I'm all in favor of that. But you can't keep an MRI at $1,500 a shot and expect me to only survive on $3,000. You know, I can't get the
exactly.
tests. I can't get the tests if they're justifying the higher prices because of administrative costs. The truth is if you The administrative costs in the private insurance you have now, if they were eliminated when you got Medicare, there would be a way to afford Medicare for all. There's a financial way to do it. By
Hmm.
doing it right, it makes more sense, but you have to keep the administrative costs down in Medicare before you
Hmm.
can fold it all in. And you have to negotiate drug prices to keep them low. Once you
Hmm.
lower the cost to me for everything, I'm happy if you give me an HSA account if an MRI is $50 because they've already paid for the machine. Even if I have to hunt for a hospital that has already paid off their machine and has
Hmm.
lowered the cost.
Or, the fact that there's a lot of places out there that are doing these specialty pop-up services like MRIs, CAT scans. And so, if these companies, they're large companies that have the
Hmm.
ability to buy these machines outright, and they're charging you $100 for a scan instead of, $500,
Yeah.
great, and if they're not having to pay all of these administrative costs and having their people deal with the claim and having the insurance company deal with the claim and send it back, and they're not having to wait 150 days to get paid,
Right.
you know it drastically reduces costs. And what it boils down to is that people have to be open to the idea that, while a national health system like pretty much any other country has would be great, the fact of the matter is that our system is not like that now.
Mm-mm.
And the idea that it will be like that is a fevered dream.
Well,
So
yeah.
how do you find the best of both worlds? And we've talked about that too,
Mhm.
where the government is the one that's negotiating the prices of medications, or even you could potentially say machines too. Because like we said, you know, in other countries, you have, let's say, six drug manufacturers. You have one entity saying, give me your best price,
Right.
versus having six companies, 11,000 different hospitals, and each of them saying, give me your best price. And
Mhm.
that best price is different between all of these other systems.
Man, you're touching on my show of the week, by the way. But that is, here's the thing about that is take Germany. Say they have, or France, they have universal healthcare, right? They pay slightly higher taxes for it. The thing is that they've spent the last 100 years building a social net, not destroying the social net. What we do is we react and backfill. And so we just dump money into something and say, there's our social net. And
Hmm.
then we put a time limit on it because the other party gets into power and says, we don't need that. You know what I mean? And then the other
Hmm.
party backfills again. And so we're just spending money
Yeah.
on things that we're destroying or on things we're throwing away. Here's a safety net, the Consumer Protection Agency. We're going to dump money into it. And then the next administration comes in and goes, yeah, we're gutting it. And we're taking the money from that.
When and the reality is that there's probably a better way than all of that to do that.
Hmm.
And rather than sit there and fight about all of this, I mean, quite literally, you could put the care in the hands of the people, let them decide what's best for themselves,
Yeah.
and do it in such a way that is far cheaper on multiple ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, and get out of their way when they need something like an abortion. You know what I mean?
And that's just it, is that there are ways to fix the situation with healthcare
Mm,
that neither party wants to listen to, because it either fucks over the donors, or it fucks over the idea that the government is going to be able to capitalize on a bunch of money that it's not getting now.
right.
And
Because
so neither part for it's a non-starter for either party, and that's the problem.
hmm well, you got to remember that the government has to pay its salaries first. So it needs a certain amount just to function, just to pay its employees. And then everything above that is a profit that can be used to line the pockets of people. Like Social Security, if we funded it correctly and stopped dipping into it, it would be running great. But we constantly short it so that we can put money into pet projects. And that's just terrible.
Well, and as much as people hate it when I say it, if Social Security was running the way that it was intended, it wouldn't be a retirement account for people either.
That's true. I don't
So,
know if it was ever meant to be, but also the family structure was based a little differently and market value. Like wood is hundreds of dollars now for a plank of plywood. Like you can't even build a house now. You can't be a homeowner without paying way more for that house now just because wood
mhm.
is more expensive. or steal or anything. I had a friend that said that. He's like, well, the price of everything is more expensive. And I was like, yeah, because we just dumped a whole bunch of money into everybody's pockets. And now everybody can afford to buy stuff that costs more. The problem is, there's certain people that were poorer to begin with, and now the inflation is affecting them. Yes,
Hmm.
that's what happens. That's inflation. You give a whole bunch of rich people a whole bunch of money, they find it expendable and buy that vacuum for $400, and now the vacuum is $400 and the poor person can't afford it.
Hmm. So I mean, and even in the government too, when you have a bunch of tax revenue coming in, like
Mhm.
in that regard too, healthcare is expensive, not just because of all the administrative costs. It's expensive because of all of the taxes that get put on it to fund the government.
Right, and as we said, the malpractice insurance that people need to have.
Hmm. And like you said, there are ways to fix these things, and we've
Mhm.
discussed them all. It's just that somebody has to be willing to sit down and say, you know what, this isn't right. Hey, somebody from the other party, let's talk about how we can actually fix this.
Right.
People shouldn't be penalized when they have HSAs and they haven't used all of their money. They shouldn't have their money taken away from them or their FSAs and have
Right.
that money gone. Why? What purpose does that serve other than lining the pockets of a corporation? That
That's
should
right.
not be legal.
That's right.
And then when
Your money should be going somewhere else other into your own pockets or your own accounts.
Well, you should be able to save that money because
Mhm.
look how realistic it is that it's like healthy, 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 healthy. You could have 15 years of great health and have a bunch of money saved up. Suddenly you have a cancer treatment that comes up. And rather than having your money taken away at the end of each of those years, you had enough money saved up that, hey, I got to go and pay for my cancer treatments in cash and it didn't bankrupt me.
Right. But
You
again,
know,
it's the price of care to begin with.
that too.
It just is like, yeah, I could have $20,000 in my HSA account, but if I come down with cancer and the first shot is 25,000, I'm fucked anyway, you know? And on that, I want to say I should, as an American, be able to invest in that as well. As if the government is giving me $3,000 a year, I should be able to match that like a 401k without tax penalties. I should be able to invest in that. And as a disabled person, if I should be able to earn what I can earn now, and if I earn more and put that into something tax exempt, I shouldn't be penalized and lose my disability for it. Because I want to say, because it takes me longer to learn a job and to have a job, and it's still risky being at the bottom of the ladder as a disabled person in a corporation, first in, first to go, disabled person, first to go, because it naturally costs a little bit more in understanding and accessibility for me. So corporations aren't eager to hire me, but they are eager to dump me. And so there's never going to be job security for a disabled person. So I think we need to work on that. I need to be able to earn as much as I can and then divert that just like a rich person so that I don't get penalized, you know?
Well, and that's just it is that I would make the argument that rich people shouldn't be able to divert either if that's the way that we're going to go.
Right.
I mean, to me, the best way that you can fix it is by doing flat rate taxes. It's
Mm,
like if you're going, and I've talked about this before. It's like if you determine what the poverty line is for the previous year, anything made at and below the poverty line tax free for everybody
right.
because you shouldn't be taxing people that are in poverty, period, end of
Right.
story.
Or close
It,
to it, by the way.
but that's just it is that if you're going to say close to it, then that should be the poverty line, period, end of story.
Well, I would say like
Because
10% above the poverty line, only because I make $30 more than being on the poverty line, you know?
but then again, at that point, then it's just you're taxing a percentage of what you make above that. And the reality is that, well, you might make 30 bucks a month, you might make 30 bucks more than the poverty line and
Mhm.
you get taxed on that. And so we say, okay, well, you shouldn't be getting taxed on it. Well, what about the person who's making 50? Well, they shouldn't. Okay, well, what about 100? Well, they shouldn't. What about a
Right.
thousand? What about 10,000? What about, and that's how we end up with all of these
Mhm.
fucking loopholes.
And then it becomes arbitrary. I got you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get it. But at the same time, too, it's like if we're going to say that if you're at this point of the poverty line, it's like anything at and below shouldn't be taxed. And if you
Definitely.
think, and if you think that that is still too low, and that people that fall into a certain income above that shouldn't be taxed.
Hmm.
That should be the poverty line.
I like that because if you're below the poverty line, will you get a tax rebate to put you at the poverty line?
And I think that's an interesting discussion to have.
Yeah, I like this. I like that idea.
But realistically speaking, is that you can figure out at what wages you are going to be tax exempt.
Hmm.
If you're only working one job, this is where it gets tricky. Because if you're working multiple jobs, that calculation becomes a little bit more difficult. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's a realistic thing for a lot of Americans.
Yeah.
Not as many as people like to claim, but
Right.
still more than should be. And that's one of those caveats where it's like, there's a bunch of people out there that are going to sit down and say, oh well, all of these Americans who have to work 2-3 jobs, numerically speaking, percentage wise speaking, that number is actually really low.
Hmm.
It's not as high as people think it is, but it's far more than it should be.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't have to work multiple jobs in order to make ends meet. Period. End of story. If you're going to work multiple jobs, then whatever you're making should be above and beyond to afford whatever luxuries you're looking for.
Right.
But when you're having to work multiple jobs just to make the poverty line, that's a problem. That's
That's
a
a
real problem.
problem. Yeah.
And so there was actually a pretty good study about it somewhere that I was reading it a couple of years ago about what that actually looked like, because the claim that I want to say that there was a claim that about a third of Americans were working multiple jobs, and they were trying to use that as the discussion of what the minimum wage should look like.
Hmm.
But when they actually dug into it, the number of people who were working multiple jobs and I want to say making like just like 10% above the poverty line
Right.
actually worked out to be something like maybe 2.5 million people at most. um that was just one of those things where it's like, people working multiple jobs is really difficult. And I think that in America we need to reassess what the poverty line looks like and understand that the poverty line looks different, wherever you live.
Yeah.
A dollar here doesn't buy the same as a dollar back in Montana.
That is
That's a
true.
that's realistic. Out here, a dollar in rent here doesn't buy the same amount, or doesn't buy the same amount of space as a dollar in rent back in Montana does.
Right.
That's realistic. And so the poverty line, the idea that there is just this, a national standard poverty line, is a real interesting discussion, because let me tell you something, making $15 an hour here in Washington fucking sucks, and you're going to be struggling to find a place to live anywhere. But
Right.
$15 an hour back in, parts of Montana, a lot of places in Montana,
Mm-hmm.
you would actually probably be able to save money and put money away.
Yeah.
That it just is it's a different calculation across multiple areas, because the taxes here that we have, I am going to say this probably for the millionth time, sales tax is regressive,
Yeah.
because while the idea is that everybody who buys something is going to have to pitch in. Yeah, okay, so the idea is that it's fair, but is it equitable? No, because the person who has $200 to buy groceries doesn't have $200 to buy groceries. When there's a 10% sales tax, they've got $180 to buy groceries on a $200 grocery bill that they need to fulfill. Whereas
Right.
a person who has $2,000 gets to buy $200 in groceries, pay $20 in sales tax, and still have plenty of money left over afterwards. I mean,
Yeah.
sales tax is regressive, and no matter what you tell me, it's not fair to the people who are impacted the most.
I agree. If anybody's ever bought DoorDash, they understand that you can get your food for $20, but then you're paying $5 in taxes, and then you're paying $5 for the app, then you're paying $5 for tip. So anybody understands that those taxes, they add up fast.
Well, and then they're also selective about what they apply tax to, and this is where it gets really weird. Like
Mm-hmm.
like some things are taxed and other things aren't, and some of it doesn't make a damn bit of sense, really.
Right.
Like for example, what there was one that was a really great example about how candy was taxed, but if it contained flour, then it wasn't taxed because it was considered a baked good. So like a Hershey's peanut butter cup was taxed, but a Twix bar wasn't. And I was like, what the fuck?
Interesting.
So the way in which people try to get around taxes or try to it's just insane.
The
And
inheritance tax, the capital gains tax, the tax on luxury items, they play with those all the time, and Republicans get rid of them and Democrats raise them.
but when you look at what Republicans and Democrats don't do is they don't actually come up with a way that if you're on any type of welfare system, they're not trying to figure out a way that gets you off of the welfare system either by steps or anything. It's either, hey,
Yes.
let's just make sure that everybody can get everything, whether or not they need it. And so you end up wasting a bunch of tax money that way. Or it's, hey, we're just going to kick you off the fucking thing and best of luck
Hmm.
to you.
Because
Rather than sitting down and saying, okay, here's the four things that we offer. We offer food assistance, childcare assistance, rent assistance, and just plain cash or healthcare, let's say. And let's say that you're making a certain amount of money and you're like, okay, my company affords me healthcare. I don't need that.
right.
In a lot of places, it's like you have to take all of it or they just kick you off of all of it.
Mm,
Like you don't get to pick and choose. So you don't get to sit down and say, okay, I don't need the health insurance. I need these three. And then you start making enough money and you're like, okay, well, in order to keep me at my job, I need childcare. I'm still struggling with the food, but I don't need money for rent. So I'm going to put that aside. That I don't need that anymore.
mm,
And then they start making enough money and they're like, okay, I don't need childcare anymore because my kids are old enough, but I still need some food assistance. Okay,
hmm.
we're going to piece that out. And then finally get to the point where it's like, I don't need childcare assistance. I don't need food assistance. I don't need rent assistance. I don't need healthcare. I've got
Right.
all of this taken care of. Instead of stepping people off and helping create
Right.
that sense of independence and allowing them, it's this fear of, well, if I don't take it all, I lose it all. And if I lose it all, then I'm just going to be stuck either back in the system or they're going to just kick me off of it when they're tired of it and they're
I
just
thought that's what happens. They kick you off of it suddenly instead of saying, "Here's the 5-year plan to get you out of poverty." You know what I mean?
right. Or anything like that. It
Hmm.
just they're the welfare system has to have a fundamental redesign so that way people who are in the system are empowered to start taking away pieces that they don't need.
Right, exactly. To work towards something and to know that it's coming ahead of time. If I know I have a year to get off of food assistance, let's say, then I know I can prepare for that. You know what I mean? And I don't know how you would go about that. But I remember when I applied, they gave me health care, but I didn't need health care because I had Medicare. I They wouldn't give me food assistance because I
Hmm.
wasn't poor enough, and they wouldn't give me help with my bills, which were 80% of my income go to bills and rent, but I couldn't get help with that. If they had given me help with my bills or my rent, then I could have afforded the food, but I couldn't because they wouldn't. And so it's this weird cycle that we
Hmm.
want to keep people in poverty, in enough poverty to where they're paying more for being poor.
But then they also complain, and but then the politicians also want to complain about these welfare queens and this, that, and the other. And it's like
Mhm.
you're not structurally creating a system in which people are able to pick and choose what they need
Right.
and save the state money on the things that they don't.
Right. If
Why are you giving them everything when they themselves are saying they don't need everything? Or they're working at a place where they're given certain things and they don't need that. That doesn't make a damn bit of sense.
right. If you give people what they don't need, then they don't use it, and then you don't spend money on it. That's the thing. It's always easier to offer somebody something you know that they're not going to take, you know?
Well, but it's easier for them to be able to sit down and say, "Oh, you don't need that? Okay, well, I guess you don't need any of it."
Right. That's
And
just
so then
ridiculous.
so then you get people who end up making the choice of working as little as they do in order to
Mhm.
keep the benefits that they do need.
Right. Of
And that doesn't
course.
make any sense.
I can't work. If I work, I can only work a certain amount. So what kind of job can I get where I tell them I can only work to a certain point, until I earn this much? And can you monitor that for me, by the way? Because I don't know, like pre-tax, post-tax, I don't know what's going on. If I gross too much, is that an issue if I net less? You know what I mean? So,
Hmm.
and how am I supposed to look that up? How am I supposed to know? How am I supposed to educate myself on that? And that these are the real problems. There might be ways. My mom, she was disabled. They sent her to school to become a travel agent, and then she had a home office, and she was a functioning member of society that earned an income until the travel market tanked because of apps, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And there was nowhere for her to go after that because they had timed her out. She had learned enough and she had gotten out of the system and they wouldn't let her back in. And that's a tragedy because stuff happens all the time.
Absolutely. And then on top of that, it's like, how, as a state, how do you figure out where you can put people so that way that if you give them that 5-year plan, how are they going to be able to get out of it, get
Mm,
out of that system? Like, the idea is that, the entitlement should be there for the people who need it, or the people who need parts of it.
mhm.
And if you want to keep people from using it, then you need to figure out how you can get people out of it, and
Right.
not just kick them off of it. Because if you're giving someone the choice between work less to get all of the benefits,
Mhm.
work and get none of the benefits, I'm sorry, but I can guarantee you that there's enough people out there that are going to make the choice of, I'm just not going to work and I'm going to collect all the benefits, or I'm
Of
going to work very
course.
little and I'm not going to collect the benefits.
Yeah.
Whereas if you give people the tools to say, all right, this is all you qualify for. Now let's take a look and see what you actually need. Okay, you only need 3 of the 4 things. Great.
Mhm.
Now let's help you come up with a plan for how do you get to where you need one less a year, if we can. Figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
instead of creating the fear that someone's going to lose something, give them the tools to succeed so that way they can sit down and say, I don't need that anymore. That's the difference.
Right.
That is really the difference. If you set someone up for success,
Mhm.
to make enough to say, you know what, I don't need that anymore, you give people power
Yeah. But
rather
it's
than keeping them in fear of, oh my God, what's going to happen to me and my family if I lose X.
But we generalize to automate. That nobody understands that what you're talking about is an individual helping an individual with an individual situation. A homeless person in Florida needs different stuff than Jason. You know what I mean? And
Mm,
so it's a different skill set. But if you just throw us both in the same machine and then say the homeless guy is part of a curve that I'm a part of, that Jeffrey's a part of, and we're basing everything on that, and then throw politics in and say, well, I don't like the homeless guy because he's not working hard enough, and that Jason guy, he should get a job, but Jeffrey's doing great. Let's help him. Then everything's fucked. You know
exactly.
what I mean?
It's the same with school.
Mhm.
There was a lot of things that got catered to me because I was on the smarter end of average.
Right,
And it's like, look, that's not fair to everybody else. Like, not everybody else can sit down and read a math book and understand advanced calculus. That's not
right.
fair to the person who's getting help and struggling with algebra.
Man, that is tough because there was a series on TikTok about that, how some guy had come up with the idea that we should devote resources to the students that will most succeed and take them away from students that show a lack of ability. And that's how our school system has been run for like 100 years. And so that's just interesting to me. We don't devote resources to the kids that need it. But every kid is on this planet to know something. You know what I
and
mean?
that's
We
and
just
that's
need to
one of the
find that. We
things.
need to find that. We didn't know that Martin Luther King was going to be Martin Luther King when he was 8 years old. And we
No.
could have denied him an education just based on his skin color and lost that. And that's the thing. Albert Einstein was German. If we had come here and we would have been like, ew, you're German, we hate you, fuck off, we would never have gotten the Manhattan Project. You know what I mean? So,
And that's, and even then you've got, that's a weird mentality to be like, oh well, let's
mm-hmm.
just shift all these resources away. It's how about we shift the resources in such a way that instead of saying, oh well, you need this and you don't need this, it's like, okay, what do you need for the career you would like to
Yes.
have? So that way
Right.
it's like, so that way you're not taking classes and learning things that
Right.
you're never going to touch again. Like,
That's right.
for me, knowing statistics, knowing calculus, knowing algebra, it's all important for things that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Trigonometry, probably a little less important.
Right.
I mean,
Consumer math, you already got that.
but even just like it's one of those things where back in the day, people had home ec and they understood how to budget, and they
Yeah.
understood like personal finance math. And it's funny to me now that that's something that they're starting to bring back.
Mm. They need
you
to.
know and so but also too, like, one of the things that we fail to consider is like most of the businesses out there are small businesses. So how do you help kids understand what business math looks like for the small business owner?
Right.
Things like that. They don't need to be taking advanced algebra. They don't need to be taking trigonometry. They don't need to be taking physics.
Right. It's so
But for
weird.
all of the ones that want to do chemistry, that want to do physics, great. Let's make sure that they've got all the resources available to do that. And especially in the
Mhm.
information age, that's a lot easier to do now.
Oh yeah, it's weird that we teach kids what you're talking about, trigonometry, algebra, um, civics in school, but we don't teach them life skills. We leave that to their homes, but then we take their parents away because we won't give them a living wage, so there's nobody to teach them the life skills. And then
Hmm.
once they hit 18, we're upset because they have no life skills. Because you weren't there to expose your child to everything, to see what interested them. Hey, I could have played the cornet in third grade, but I couldn't afford it. So guess what? I played the recorder and moved on to something different, you know what I mean?
Right.
But I was exposed to it, you know? I just wasn't exposed to it enough. I think kids should be exposed to that stuff. Let's find out what they are good at the time, because that'll be in their heads forever, right? And they can
Hmm.
always go on to something else as long as education is free. So,
And or even still, like, you have so much information out there now that there are ways in which you can get students to learn advanced topics.
yeah, they are.
And I mean, I watch my kids do it all the time. They're
Mhm.
learning art things from the internet. They're
Right.
learning new techniques from the internet. They're practicing it themselves in drawing pads on tablets. They're they're not in art classes. They're learning this stuff elsewhere.
Right.
So if you mean to tell me that we can't figure out how to give the most advanced kids the tools to be able to do what they're eventually going to do,
Mhm.
like I told people, about my master's program. What we always said in my master's program was not that I was smarter than you. I just knew how to use Google better than you did.
Exactly. Well, that's what I'm talking about. Instead of a parent observing and monitoring a child's life skills like you are, a lot of parents can't do that. And so
Yeah.
children are skipping through everything to find it themselves, because they don't know what's important to learn and what isn't important to learn. And so they're
Hmm.
using Google better and better and leaving their parents out of it. Before
Hmm.
we end the show on the topic, I'm just going to say I watched a show called Crime of the Century, and it's on HBO Max. And so it's a searing indictment of big pharma and the political operatives and government regulations that are involved in this stuff and the reckless distribution of opioids and the whole opioid epidemic. And yeah, it's pretty much right on topic for this show because we talked a lot about the medical system. And man, it's scary. It's scary. It's what we talk about doctors being, just when they start working for themselves and their own profits, they're not working for us anymore, but they're not telling us that they're doing that. And having big pharma involved in that and the way they distributed and the way they just blatantly lied to get FDA approval for this stuff, man, it's something to look into.
No, it's absolutely scary, especially when you see that, the way in which they cornered the market was just, I mean, genius by their own standards and by
Hmm.
any other standards, but absolutely diabolical.
If they had been honest about everything, then it wouldn't have been genius. It just wouldn't have been approved. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks for being here, and join us Thursday for the continuation of this episode because we have some good topics coming up. All right. So, anyway, oh, shoot. This is Thursday. So, right now, Jeffrey, let me see.
Hmm.
Let me see. Let me see. Where is it? There it is. The WHO
Hmm.
is holding their World Health Assembly, and that's kind of exciting. And I wanted to let everybody know they could find the World Health Organization on Twitter at WHO at WHO, and there's a hashtag WHA74, which is covering the conference. And I'm going to put the YouTube channel information and the website channel in the description portion of this podcast, because I think it's important that everybody knows what's going on with the World Health Organization, because
Hmm.
it seems to be more bipartisan, more country run, and so they're going to have some topics. It's all about the pandemic and everything else, you know. So
Hmm.
check that out. Follow the World Health Organization like I do, and maybe learn something that your politicians aren't telling you. Hi, Jeffrey.
What's up?
I did put some topics down, so that was that one.
Ooh.
I I don't know. I'm interested in the World Health Organization and everything they do. So there's this study by Reuters that says over half of Donald Trump supporters still believe that he is the true president and not Joe Biden. But guess what? When I looked into that more, Jeffrey, it said that only 2,000 people were polled. So is this an exaggeration of 53% of Republicans when you're only identifying 2,000 of them?
Well, and here's the ultimate question is where are you pulling these people from?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Get in
You
depth
know,
with this. Like it's the
so
analytics of are you going to like George Orwell College and picking 2,000 people, or are you going to the Bronx, you know what I mean?
right, and that's this is where it gets this is where as a data person shit like this
Mhm.
frustrates me
Well,
so bad.
and this is from a democratic leaning information site. That's why I brought it up this way.
So this is where I call bullshit because you're looking for confirmation bias. You
Right.
you want to believe that there's a significant group of people out there. Let me tell you something. In a lot of my Republican family that I know and love dearly, even about most of the I would say probably a good 90% of them are like, yeah, no, Biden won the election.
Right. Okay.
So, you know, and I would say of the last 10%, 9% of them are people who are like, yeah, I think that there were some problems with the election that need to be addressed, but it is what it is. And then there's the last 1% that are, like, oh no, Trump is my true president. But
Yeah, but they just didn't do enough research.
oh hell no.
They're just Tom Brady fans that won't admit he's in decline. You know what I mean? They're just going for what they went for.
It's this is one of those things where you're trying to create a data point in order to create a talking point in order to create time to own the Republicans, and
Hmm.
you just end up showing your ass on how little you actually know about polling and analytics and data.
Yeah.
Like somebody went looking for this specific outcome, and that's the way that I view it. Because okay, so let's start with it, the group that did the polling was democratically okay.
Mhm.
So the question is
Reuters, I guess Reuters is respected, right?
Reuters is very respected, yes, but
Okay.
then the question is where you have multiple questions in terms of data collection that make this very suspect. Number one,
Right.
when you ask that question, so 53% of the Republicans polled said that Trump is still the true president. Okay,
Right.
so what that would then mean, like if you were to try and extrapolate that out to the population, that would mean that there would be about 45% of Republicans think that
Hmm.
like that Trump is still the true president. Okay,
Well,
that's
they're saying it equals to 53% of all Republicans.
exactly. But that's the problem with that kind of
Hmm.
data line is that where did you pull these people from? Did you pull Republicans from all around the country? Did you pull
Right.
Republicans from just the deep south? Did you like intentionally lean out to like people who were known supporters of people like DeSantis and all of
Hmm.
that? You can easily cherry pick data.
Yeah.
Like if you know that a certain county voted a specific way and you make all of your calls to a specific county,
Yep.
Easy to get the data that you want, not the data that exists.
Yep. And then if you ask the question a certain way, you get different results, and we all know that.
Absolutely. And so that's where this kind of shit gets real frustrating is that are there Republicans out there that think that Trump is still the true president? Absolutely. Do I think that Reuters data collection is probably suspect? Absolutely. I have no idea what the questions look like, and
Yeah,
those
me neither.
questions
That's the
those
problem.
questions could be intentionally leaning.
Exactly. There's no other information in the article, and it's the headline. It dares you. It dares you to go past the headline to look at it. And it says, hey, look, right in the first paragraph, it says that our we were suspect in bias. But hey, we're going to post it up as fact anyway. And that's how little people are going to research what they need to research to find out that it might be a bit of bullshit. And there's a show Pod Save America, which I don't promote, but I love. And what they do is they tell us about their polls and the questions and how they asked the questions differently and who they polled. And they're pretty
Mm-hmm.
upfront about their polling. But you have to listen to that to get it, because they also do the same thing with their headlines. Look, our poll said this, but guess what? We asked it a different way, and it said this, but different headline. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's just it. Is that of that 53%, how are you lumping that in? Is it when you ask the question where there's several different sets, and one set of data was Trump is our president, rightfully and duly
Mm-hmm.
elected, and I think Trump should be president because there were issues with the election, and they lumped
Right.
those two together. You see that constantly, where it's like 45% of people support Democrats, and then you have 10% of people who are unsure, so 55% of people support Democrats. What?
Right.
No, that's not how that
Right.
works.
That was my other thought, is that they could have literally said 47% of Republicans don't believe Donald Trump is the true president. You know?
It or it could be that they've lumped these people in such a way that it could be a spectrum of you've got Republicans who are like Trump was an insurrectionist, to Trump didn't help matters, to I'm not sure how I feel about this, to Trump should probably still be our president because I've got problems with the election, to Trump daddy please rule me.
Right.
And depending on how you lump those categories in, you could say 53% and lump in the people who are completely neutral, the people who had issues, and Trump daddy,
Right.
and put all of those three together and say 53% of Republicans think that Donald Trump is the true president. And that is intellectually, statistically, mathematically dishonest in every way,
Mm-hmm.
shape, and form. That does I have the math person in me is coming out.
Yeah,
Uh,
I get it.
when you collect data, the reason why we collect a wide set of data is so that way we can sit down and determine what a statistical spread looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Statistically speaking, probably most Republicans, probably a larger majority than you would think, are of the mindset that Trump lost the election. Whether or not they have issues is an entirely separate
Right.
thing. It could be, did Trump lose the election? Yes or no?
Exactly. You're asking for a black and white answer, but if you asked it in a more gray fashion, you might get a different answer.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the thing is, like, I can ask the same question three different ways, and you could potentially give me three different responses that I could then
Right.
categorize in one of two ways. So for example, the false binary. Did Trump win the presidency? Yes or no?
No.
Did Trump win the presidency? Yes, unsure, no.
Unsure. I
with
know
the
you're doing it
election
on the spot,
with
right?
with the elections being run in a way that is different from how they've been run in the past, do you feel that Trump fairly lost the election?
Ooh, that's a good one. I like
Because
that
here
one.
because the more that you start putting into the question, the more it muddies the way that you answer.
Mm-hmm.
Because you might say Trump unfairly lost the election,
Right.
but here's the question: does that mean that Trump lost the election, or does that mean that you question the results?
That's
You see, in
interesting.
a legal realm, it's called a complex question.
Mm-hmm.
It's designed to make you say something that you don't want to say. So
Yes.
you add in multiple things to get people to talk, to get people to answer a way that you want them to. And then that way they can dig into you on the way that you answer the question. There's no right
Hmm.
way to answer the question. That's the whole point of it.
Right.
And in a mathematical sense, there's no right way to answer a question like that. Because what you're asking is not whether or not Trump lost the election. You're asking about whether or not it's fair and he lost.
Right. That's an interesting point. I kind of want to stay on for a minute because I had this theory that COVID was really bad in an election year because Republicans saw it as voter suppression, you
Mhm.
know? And then they could complain when they did all these extra things like mail-in voting and drop boxes and everything because of the pandemic. But in the in the future, when the pandemic wasn't an issue, they could complain that we did have a different version of an election than we had normally had.
Mhm. And that was just it, is that it was, there was no right answer to this. And here's
Right.
and mathematically speaking, here's what's really funny. In the previous election, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote 66 million to 63 million.
Right.
But Donald Trump won the election because of the electoral college process.
Mhm.
So, statistically speaking, does it surprise me that Donald Trump lost the popularity vote? Absolutely not. He didn't win the last one.
Right.
It wasn't like when W was elected, where W lost the popularity vote but won the electoral college. But then in the next election, he actually won the popular vote too.
Right. Right.
So that's one of those things where it's like, okay, it's like everybody gets their moment to complain and scream and yell,
Mhm.
because that's kind of a mess. But when with the difference between W and Trump was is that W then went on to win the next election quite handily, and we had no questions. It's like, okay, yeah, popularity wise, he lost the first one.
Mhm.
Electoral college wise, he won, but then in the next one, it didn't really matter because he won the popular and the electoral. Trump lost the popular vote yet again, despite gaining a record amount of votes. I mean, both parties
Right.
gained a record amount of votes, and that's
Yeah.
mathematically something you have to take into consideration. Is
Mhm.
is that if you have the same kind of spread, like even if you were to like shrink it down, because let's say it was about 66 63, so you're looking at 129 million people in the first one,
Right.
and then it was like what, 82 to 73.
Thought it was 72 to 80. I
I
don't
don't
know.
It was something like
85
that.
maybe.
But so you're looking at you're looking at an additional spread. So what that should tell Republicans is, number one, your candidate got more votes. So in terms of looking at the system,
Mhm.
it allowed your candidate to get more votes. So there's obviously something in there that worked for you.
Right.
It's just that your candidate also happened to suck.
Yeah, he didn't offer any policy.
He didn't. Well, if how do I put this? If Trump was being judged on his first 2 years only and we had had an election, the idea that Trump would have lost this election wouldn't be a thought, because Trump's first 2 years were gangbusters for the economy.
Yeah,
Everybody was doing better.
that's true. Because he offered a stimulus as if there was a pandemic when there was no pandemic. That's why a $1.9 trillion package given to corporations to benefit them. Of course, everything was gangbusters, but people were getting poorer. The K-shaped economy began. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you saw a lot of major corporations raise their minimum wage to $15 an hour without government involvement.
Yeah.
Like so in terms of like some of like the biggest offenders, they were the first ones, to raise their minimum wages. So it's
Mm.
like there were some benefits, but then Trump started doing the tariff stuff, and that really fucked
Right.
with the economy. And then COVID managed to hit, and that really fucked with the economy. And so really, the last 2 years of his presidency is what he got judged on, because
Right.
he bombed it hard. His response, his tariff wars with friends and enemies, royally slowed down the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Before COVID hit, it was already slowing down the economy. And then COVID hit and totally blew everything out of the water. I
Yeah.
mean, when I say that whatever Biden inherits is going to be because of some of the stuff that Trump got, I'm not I'm not exaggerating that. There's going to be a lot of benefits that are going to make Biden look good that were initiated under Trump.
Agreed. The vaccine is proof of that.
The vaccine is proof. This is one of those things, like, I don't like Trump, but you got to give credit where credit is due. Trump
Hmm.
cut the red tape on getting money to companies to get this vaccine rolling.
Right. And that's always my point with Trump supporters. Why wouldn't you take the Trump vaccine instead of trying to go for the Kung flu? You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
why would you say I'd rather get the Kung flu than the Trump vaccine? That never made sense to me. Just because Biden's distributing Trump's product doesn't mean it's not.
Right.
So I
and
don't
and
know.
and the tax cuts that exist right now, the corporations are still going to be taking advantage of when people are back in the office,
Hmm.
which is why you're seeing, I mean, from a business standpoint, that's why you're seeing a rash of higher paying jobs. I mean, granted, are they as high paying as they should be? No. Are they higher paying than they were? Yes.
Right.
And so, like I said, in the last show, this is the moment where, if you're going to try and take advantage and move up, and especially if you didn't necessarily think you had a chance,
Hmm.
there are enough places hurting out there now where you might actually have a better chance at moving up, simply because they need a body to fill a position. You would be
Right.
surprised at how many places are going to hire somebody because they're willing to train you into that position. You might
Hmm.
not have all of the experience that they're looking for. It's not like the economy was under Obama, where, even I, with a bunch of qualifications, was getting turned down consistently because there were not enough job openings, but there were plenty of applicants. And right now, it's the exact inverse.
Yeah.
There are a lot of job openings and not enough applicants.
And if you've ever gone to a party and been like one of the first ones there, you understand that you know everything that's going on in the party. But if you show up 2 hours late, you just seem lost. Everybody's in a different speed than you. So get
Mhm.
in there early. So there was this question you brought me to by talking about the corporate tax cut. There's a situation in which Democrats do not want to eliminate the Trump tax cuts
Mhm.
because it will alienate donors. But they don't. It seems like Democrats don't understand this. Like they keep saying, why wouldn't they cut the Trump tax cuts? They're extremely popular among the people. And so I wanted to get a little clip so I could send it to these people and say, yes, if you eliminate those tax cuts, corporations won't donate to you anymore. And
Mhm.
you can't get reelected just on the smaller dollar donations that you're getting now, which is the exact situation the Republicans are in, because Trump is sucking up the small dollar donations, and corporations can't officially donate to them without getting scrutinized in this day and age, which is fair. I don't think
Mhm.
they should be getting donated to if they're going to do these regressive policies. But
Mhm.
that's the situation, is you need the corporate money, so you got to give corporations money to get that money, because if you take their money, they're not going to give it to you. They're going to give it to the people that are fighting to give it back to you. And so of course Democrats don't want to cut the Trump Trump took the heat for all that corporate tax cuts, right? And all
Right.
they have to do is ignore it and hope that Democrats don't say, "Hey, what are you doing?" You know what I mean?
Right.
It keeps Mitch McConnell happy because he said, "Do not get rid of them. Like, don't roll those back." And so yeah, it's popular to fuck Trump and corporations, but maybe you should have a conversation and decide, well, we've helped the people, we've helped the corporations, we've helped everybody. Like, you still need to help corporations. They're still a part of America, right? Even though they suck, and I
Mhm.
wish Citizens United was over with and they couldn't donate all this money. I kind of think you still need to help corporations.
Oh, absolutely.
Nice.
Oh,
Hi, Billy.
Billy, you're being a pest. You gonna come? Are you gonna come up here and say hi to everybody?
Nice. So have you heard about the 1-6 Commission?
The 1-6 commission.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The January 6th commission. Yes.
Yeah. It turns
Yep.
out Republicans got
There's
everything they wanted on their wish list and then voted against it.
Yep.
And Marco Rubio says that this is just going to be requests of subpoenas to attack Republicans, and that's not how it worked. Have you heard anything about that?
Um, it sounds an awful lot like the Republicans don't want to do like what they did to Democrats with Benghazi.
Right. I'm just wondering, like, what's the Republican rationale without saying that they would end up being investigated for their roles in the incident. But from their perspective,
The
why?
rationale is that it was 4 months ago. We should just get over it.
Okay, that is what they're trying to do is move on past it.
Yeah, it's like you sat there and did Benghazi for 10 years, and
Mm-hmm.
now that you have your own issue where people ended up dead, you don't want to be investigated.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that's I'm gonna go with fuck you.
Yeah.
And you don't get to play this game and then expect it, not to get played against you when it's their turn. Like
Right.
that's the answer is that you did this shit with Benghazi despite multiple times
Right.
there was no wrongdoing found by bipartisan, by Democrats, by Republicans, but you keep bringing it up. Okay, great. Now the Democrats have their own version of Benghazi.
Mm-hmm.
Except it happened right in the fucking capital of the country. You literally had the Confederate flag walking through the halls of the Capitol, and that didn't even happen during the goddamn Civil War.
Right. A woman got shot in the head trying to break into the chambers.
And somehow, she's the one the one that was, not the villain in this. And it's funny because, for all of the blue lives that mattered, when a cop had to shoot somebody to keep them from breaking into the Capitol, blue lives didn't seem to matter anymore real fucking quick.
Right. That whole incident proved that blue lives didn't matter.
Oh,
And then
absolutely.
and
It was a means to an end, and that end
mhm.
was snuffing out black lives.
Right. And then they went ahead and decided to vote against funding the Capitol Police, which was amazing to me. And I also wanted to get this on the record. And I said this to my friend in the other room. It's amazing that in the end, it was Republicans that decided to defund the police.
Right? It's like for all of the defund the police, we can't defund the police. The moment that, their fuckwits decided to storm the Capitol, suddenly defund the police is an okay option. Once
Right.
again, this is for you,
Yeah, exactly.
and you get to go fuck yourself. That's just, y-
I know,
it just,
right?
if we could hand out gold medals for mental
Hmm.
gymnastics, the Republicans would be the winners right now, clearly.
Right. But my thing is like they're lost and I want to help them navigate the map to get out of it, but I don't know how they got there. So I can't like go in and say I see where you're coming from. I see where this makes sense, but it doesn't and
You know those
I can't figure out how Mitch
You know
McConnell
those you know
thinks
those
that it
mazes where you
yeah.
enter at the bottom and they're a circle and you kind of have to work your way around and
Yes.
well, it's like that. It's just
Mhm.
that somebody shoved their head up their ass and now they're having to work their way around in order to figure out how to get back out.
Right. I want to help them get back out because they're Americans like me. I just don't understand the logic that got them there, you
There is no
know?
logic. There is no logic. That's the problem here.
But
You know,
doesn't there have to be?
Not when you put Trump daddy as the head of your party and you go
Mhm.
by his whims.
Good
Whims are not logic.
good point. Good point.
And that's just it is that the Republicans could say no, we don't want to investigate this because, and I quote, currently we have the Department of Justice, the FBI, the CIA already working on this. This
Right.
is not a great means of use of taxpayer dollars. There's already a
Mm.
bunch of stuff that is happening that is being determined and played out, and that we need to let that play through the justice system first before, because they're gathering all that information
Right.
already, and there's still
Right.
more to be gathered. If they came out and just said that, while there would be a bunch of Democrats that are pissed off, logically it also makes sense.
Thank
It's like
you.
there's already stuff happening behind the scenes. There's
Mhm.
already investigations, there's already court cases, there's going to be a bunch of information that is going to come out, and it just is practically not the best use of the House or the Senate's time. And
Right.
they can hold hearings on it after. the FBI exhausts their investigations, after the CIA exhausts their investigations, after the Department of Justice exhausts its investigations. After that, absolutely. Like, bring it up then, because you're going to
Yes.
have all of this information to be able to go through. That would make sense.
Thank you. That does make sense. It's just the messaging, and for Republicans being so good at messaging, it's just hard to fathom that they're lying instead of just splitting the hairs like that. You
Yeah.
know?
And so,
You don't have to say that it's a witch hunt for Republicans when you got your wish list of having half of the panel being Republicans, and they can't subpoena Democrats without Democrats agreeing to it, and you can't subpoena a Republican without a Republican agreeing to it. Those were the terms of that Kevin McCarthy wanted, but now they're all saying no, it's a witch hunt. It's not a witch hunt.
and that's where, if there is senator involvement, if there is House rep involvement,
Hmm.
I fully expect that the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ will uncover it. And that in and of itself is going to be far more productive.
Right. And you you have committees in the House and in the Senate, and these committees can look into whatever they we have the intelligence committee, we have the judiciary committee, we have the oversight committee. We can look into all this stuff with those committees, right? And Democrats have a majority where they don't have to ask permission for a subpoena, you know? But I do like about the commission is that none of them are politicians. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And that it's almost like a lottery draft. Like we could do a what is that fantasy football pool, right?
Hmm.
And who are we gonna pick? And I heard Fiona Hill, and I was like, "Ooh, I want Fiona Hill on there." You know what I
Right.
mean?
And so that just, to me, in terms of why would it make sense to not do the commission yet,
Right.
there's a lot that has yet to be found out. There's a lot that's still playing out. There are investigations that are still ongoing.
Yeah.
and and the information is going to be impartial, and it's going to end up looking a lot like the Russian collusion case. Unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be rushed, it's going to be a day late and a dollar short, and then it's just going to serve to polarize people more. Whereas if the FBI is like, hey, look, we've got one of these reps having a conversation with multiple leaders of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, and
Mm-hmm.
they were talking about the best way to get into the Capitol,
Mm-hmm.
then okay, well, they're going to find that, and that's going to then be the basis of what do you do next, what happens
Right.
there. So while I don't agree that it's a witch hunt, I do agree that it's a political stunt, and
Okay.
that it's going to fuck up whatever investigations are currently ongoing. And if you want to see some people behind bars for what happened on January 6th, they need to stay the fuck out of it. Is what needs to happen.
Right.
If you want some actual justice, if you want some people in jail for what they did,
Mm-hmm.
politicians need to shut up and let the law enforcement bodies figure it out.
I like that. And you have to remember that just because it's Joe Biden's um, department, like the Justice Department, it's not Joe Biden's Justice Department. It's supposed to be independent. You know what I mean?
And
And I
let's
know
also remember too that all of these investigations started while Trump was still technically in office.
there is a lot of investigations that started when Trump was in office, which is
Yep.
fascinating to me.
Like Matt Gaetz.
Oh, Matt, I'm sorry. And it really sucks that I had to defend him on Twitter the other day. Somebody was like, oh, so the Lincoln Project put up this tweet, right? And it said Matt Gaetz. They tagged Matt Gaetz and put an hourglass. And I was like, what is that supposed to do? You know, and somebody was like, well, you know, highlighting pedophilia is always important. And I was like, but you didn't do that, did you? Like, you didn't do a call of action. You didn't share a link to tell me where to go to find out the evidence. Like, you're not presenting new evidence. There's no shock value. You just tagged him. And this person was like, well, it's important. And I was like, yeah, but none of that was represented in the tag, Matt Gaetz. And somebody else was like, how does the GOP not expel him from his judiciary committee? And I was like, because we're innocent until proven guilty. And until somebody shows evidence that he's guilty, he's innocent. Like,
No, and it's not even that they show evidence until he is convicted. He is innocent,
But that
and
what I'm
that's
saying.
and that's how it works. That's at least that's how it should work.
But
Having
what?
worked in law, that is
Mhm.
not how it works. The court of public opinion paints people as guilty, whether or
Right.
not they are or not,
But
and then from there, we end up seeing people get convicted
that's my
or
point,
not.
is that they're asking why Matt Gaetz's friends and colleagues aren't evicting him. They're not saying why aren't Democrats getting rid of him. And why would Kevin McCarthy, Matt Gaetz's friends, say, "Oh, there's an allegation, bye." You know what I mean? Like that it doesn't make sense that they would eliminate him until there is proof that they need to eliminate him. And that sucks because I think he's a
And
disgusting frat paddle. And
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 and and
just
and there's the evidence doesn't look so good right now.
yeah, I know, right? No,
Like, who the
totally.
fuck uses Venmo for this kind of stuff? It's like this is where it's like, the people who are yelling cancel culture, obviously the people who never fucking bought weed in college. It's like you
Right?
pay cash and you don't fucking send a message, you dumbass.
He sends the money to Joel and then Joel sends the exact amount to a woman. Yeah, no, I get that. And this
That's why it's just so funny. It's like you clearly don't understand what it is you're talking about, and you clearly don't understand technology.
right.
Why the fuck would you Venmo somebody that is now a pled guilty sex trafficker?
Mhm.
Like that's there's gonna be some sweating, but it's one of those things where it's like, I coming from the defense side of things, it is innocent until proven guilty.
Well, I
But
mean,
but
yeah.
if I were Matt Gates's lawyers, I would be like,
Mhm.
fuck.
Right, but here's the thing about politics that people don't know. If you're convicted of a crime and you're a politician, the penalty for you is loss of office, right? Like you can trade, "I'll leave my office if you don't charge me," and they'll accept that.
It
And
depends on
so
the crime though, but
well,
that's just it. Is it depends on financial
the
crimes.
federally, I'm saying the state will still get you, but federally, they'll
Hmm.
they'll just remove it. They'll just say, "Yeah, get out of office. We'll accept that," and then you're screwed in the state.
Yeah, well, and that's where I think you're gonna see like Trump's stuff right now with New York, where he's
Oh my
being
gosh,
that's
that
that's really something else.
that's fascinating. So they took a civil investigation and broke it off into criminal and joined with the federal, right? Like the
Hmm.
US district attorney,
I
which
think so.
I didn't really like because if you're taking all the crimes and making them federal, he might have a pocket pardon. And so that worries me is that they're just eliminating everything criminal and putting it into a federal investigation and leaving the civil stuff to the state so the state can collect money and the feds can exonerate him with a pardon.
Later, yep, and that's exactly it. Whereas if it's a state crime and he gets convicted in the state,
Right.
then you know the likelihood of the governor of New York pardoning him is going to be very unlikely.
Yeah, extremely unlikely. But we will find out because this is like the last year for Cy Vance, who is the U.S. attorney looking into it. I get
I
so
think so.
confused. There's a Tish James and there's Cy Vance, and they're both attacking Trump fairly, by the way. And Tish James is also decapitating the NRA, so she's one of my heroes.
As somebody who is a very Second Amendment person, I have to say fuck the NRA because they've
Hmm.
become a cesspool. They're not
Exactly.
they're not the same organization that supposedly was in favor of gun rights and all of that. It very much became a white men only frat party that they used the money to buy strippers for. So
Mm, yeah. Mm.
even a lot of people who are on the gun rights side of things say fuck the NRA.
Oh, I totally agree. They're not doing you any favors. They're making you look bad by keeping this
Oh
violence
no, like
continuing, you know?
no, the NRA right now, the NRA looks really bad. It's
Yeah.
like, and when you got people that are sporting those stickers, you're like, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a couple other newer groups out there that I need to do my research on before I even talk about them at all.
And
Um,
the NRA was denied bankruptcy. So they're going
mhm.
to have to pay.
And but that's just it. Is that organization is so fucking corrupt at this point where
Hmm.
you know you're better off just gutting that one and calling it a life.
Yeah.
You know, there's just no point on that one anymore.
Yeah. Hopefully it gives Wayne LaPierre a scarlet letter so he can't be involved in anything anymore, because some corporation's just going to hire him, you know what I mean? Smith and Wesson or somebody's going to hire him as a spokesperson or something,
Not if they know what's good for them.
or a lobbyist, you know, because he still has a lot of clout. He still has a lot of connections. He's going to be picked up, you know.
Unfortunately, but I think if you want to actually advance Second Amendment rights for all Americans, uh, yeah, that dude's got to go.
He's got to go. Yeah. So here's my question. I've been having this argument with people on Twitter that they're saying they are trying to be oversight for the media, and they're constantly bringing up Fox News as misleading. And what I keep trying to tell them is Fox News isn't media. It's like The Simpsons, it's like Family Guy. So when you say Tucker Carlson says something, I think Homer Simpson said something too. And it's this, what I want to know is there like, should we create a policy for the FCC that redefines the definition of what can call itself media? And wouldn't that just eliminate Fox News immediately?
No, media, you have to think of media as this overarching thing. Like media is not a news company. A news company is media. But so what I would say is that we
Mm,
already have definitions on what news is, and Fox has made the point to say that they're an entertainment company, not a news company.
right, right.
So that's what I would say. That's how I would start this off. Number one, they're not calling themselves news, and if they refuse to call themselves news by corporate and structural reasons, they're
Hmm.
not news. Number one.
Right, but they do put it on all their chyrons and on their promotions, Fox News. You know, they're even on Twitter, Fox News. That's my issue.
Look, Facebook has news, and nobody takes that seriously.
Yeah, everybody does, Jeffrey. Everybody does. That's the problem. We all take fake butts and Facebook news seriously. Fucking Mike Zuckerman. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's so that's just it. Is that number one? When you're asking for media accountability, number one,
Hmm.
like, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Are you talking about people? Are you talking about news sites? Are you talking about blogs? Are you
Yeah,
talking about social media? Are you talking about places that I mean, YouTube is technically media,
yeah.
and
That's
YouTube is like they're like, fuck it, just throw it all up here,
Yeah,
except for porn.
it's the vagary of the word so that you can expand. I always say dig deeper into a niche. Don't be like media oversight. Be specific, like you said, news oversight, gaming oversight. You know, like you're not gonna one day call out some Twitcher because they played Fortnite wrong, right?
And then you have the greater question is what is it about the news that you're wanting oversight on? Are you looking at fact checking? Are you looking at representation? Are you looking at writers putting out whatever the fuck that study was?
Right.
What is it that you're trying to what is it that you're trying to oversee?
Hmm.
What aspect are you actually looking at? Because what was it here? Washington Post ended up having, like, a few different news sites ended up having to print a retraction over something here a few weeks ago.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, like if you're looking at fact checking, if you're looking at um, source checking, things like that, does news need more oversight? I would argue yes.
I think it
I
has it. I think we're all looking at every story questioning it, right?
No, we're not. We're not.
That's sad.
That's that's problem number one. Problem number two is that a retraction doesn't mean the same thing as what it did, 20 years ago.
Right.
You know, talk is cheap, and right now you've got people that can pretty much say whatever they want and then later be like, oh well, what we actually meant was, or okay, blah, 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 blah. And anyways, now we're moving on with the same topic.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I hate to bring up but you see what's going on with the My Pillow guy, and he's like, we've got all of this information. Okay, show us.
Right.
What
Show us.
proof? Give me some proof.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing. I mean, I don't like to quote Lindsey Graham, but I got to quote Lindsey Graham. I asked for 10 cases of voter fraud and I didn't even get one.
Right.
They said they had 1,000 cases. I said, give me 10. They didn't get one.
Hmm. There's 15. There's 15 of questionable votes, but none. It's weird. A lady voted and wasn't supposed to vote because she was still on parole, but her vote wasn't counted because she was still on parole, and she got 5 years for voting. And then there's a guy in Pennsylvania that voted
Killed
for
his
his,
wife.
yeah, killed his wife and voted for her, and he
Voted.
got he
Yep.
got probation. So I don't know what are you calling voter fraud? You know what I
And
mean?
that's just it. Is that just because you don't like the system that all of these states agreed to, that's not fraud.
Right.
Like if the system agreed to it, if the state election systems agreed to it, and they ran it the way that it was agreed to, and you don't like the outcome, that's not fraud.
Well, that's what they're saying, isn't it? We talked about that. Is that we all agreed to something, and then COVID hit, and we were like, "Oh, we got to change things." And people were like, "It's too soon to the election. You can't do it that soon." And we were like, "But we have to," and they were like, "You can't." And that's the whole argument: is that Democrats jumped in and were opportunistic in changing and rigging the system to their advantage when that's not true. That's not true. Throughout history of voting in America, Republicans were the ones that liked voting by mail. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
it,
And even in a lot of places, like flat out voting by mail worked in
Colorado,
terms
right?
of getting people to vote for either party. It worked.
Yeah.
Now, here's what here's my opinion on it. Do I think that there was fraud? Absolutely, because there's always fraud in every election. Was it wide scale?
hmm
No.
It was, but it was committed by Donald Trump and his henchmen.
I
Honestly,
don't
they were.
even I don't that's the problem is that that's not even there, and it wasn't even wide scale. I mean, when you look at the number of cases that have come up, there have only been like maybe a handful of cases where you have one person committing multiple frauds, but even then it's not that many. Like from a
It was his propaganda that I'm saying attempted to
oh,
rig the
absolutely.
election.
I mean, the fact of the matter was he was talking down the security of the election before the election was even going to be held by mail.
Right, right, exactly.
And realistically, this goes back to the whole how we responded to COVID was either blown out of proportion one way or the other.
Yes.
Realistically, what should have happened was is everybody should have got a mail-in ballot, or everybody should have got mailed a ballot. Everybody should
hmm
have had the time to figure out when who they were going to vote for and get everything done, so that way all they had to do was show up with their ID and shove their ballot into a polling station, and that was that.
That's right.
That's all I mean, realistically, if you want to make voting easier, like you mail everybody a ballot, everybody
hmm
gets to fill out, and then you have expanded hours leading, like for 2 weeks leading up to the election, so that way people can actually show up at a time that works for them to
That's
drop off
funny.
their ballot. Like this was actually really easy. Like you want to talk about the security of it, like the security aspect of it was actually very simple,
hmm
and it was hybrid. You get everybody a ballot, and then you put a bunch of polling places up where people can walk in as they see fit, as they need
Right.
to. Because realistically, the historical issue is people being stuck at work and not being able to vote.
Yeah.
So if you actually expand polling hours
hmm
and make it so that way people all they have to do is show up with their completed ballot and their ID, and they're
Right.
in and out in less than 5 minutes, like actually isn't a difficult solution, and arguably you're not really changing a whole lot other than the fact that you're just mailing out ballots to people.
Right. But it's just amazing that Republicans think that like frontline workers, people with two jobs, poor people, black people, disabled people aren't Republican. Like if you're working two jobs, you can't get there between 9 and 5, right? So,
Exactly.
and then you eliminate access after that? That doesn't make sense. You're eliminating access for your voters too. And
Hmm.
if you're saying that Republicans care more about voting, then you're saying you're going to disproportionately affect the Republican voter. You know?
And that's where I say that The system birthed the idea that you could get more voters involved,
Mm-hmm.
and you can get more voters involved across party lines. The security aspect was actually really simple, and neither party wants to think about this. The
Yeah.
party of send everybody a mail-in ballot, the Democrats, you got the send everybody a ballot part right. The we need election integrity and security part. Okay, great. Have more polls, have some election workers that work expanded hours,
Mm-hmm.
and have them show up with their completed ballot and their ID.
Yep.
Like, this actually wasn't difficult.
And what's funny is I watched a guy on the news, a Democrat, saying, if we can, I can't, if we can create an infrastructure to protect the stock market, we can create a voting app. And I was like, fuck, at least somebody's thinking about this now, you know? Because if I can
Right.
just, here's my problem with the ballot. If I vote 2 weeks before the election, like in 2016 when people voted and then Donald Trump turned into the giant biggest douchehead in the last 2 weeks of the election, a lot of people already voted and would have changed their vote. And that's why I think that an up-to-date app, where I can change my vote up until the last minute is important. But I don't know how we would protect that. That's not me. That's over my head. I'm just saying
and
that's
and as the information security person who works in
mhm.
infosec,
Yeah,
I don't trust that, and
I
I
know.
I work in a place where our money is affected every day, and
Right.
I'm constantly on the lookout for people trying to fuck with that system.
Mhm.
That's one of those things. Like, I love the idea until I start thinking about it.
Yeah,
And then
me
it's like
too.
it's more of a nightmare than you'll ever want, because the reality is that, there are enough nation state actors out there that are going to try and influence the vote one way or another for
Mhm.
people,
Yeah,
you
that's
know.
just there's infrastructure built in these, and they're doing it to all the countries, not just ours, you know what I mean?
hmm So, like, that's just it. Is I like the idea, but
Mhm.
unfortunately, it's just not going to be as safe and secure. And the other issue there is that, when it comes to a recount, who's to say that after you've submitted your information, that it doesn't get changed by some nation state that's already gotten into the back end database system?
So even if it is protected and secure, not enough people will think that it can be to make it
No,
usable. Okay.
no. At this point, it's just not possible. And
Right.
especially when you see the depth of acts that have happened to our critical infrastructure, to,
Mhm.
like, I mean, you look at the pipeline aspect. What are we going to do if somebody's voting software gets held ransom?
Right.
So, you would have a bunch of West Coast states that suddenly wouldn't be able to vote for Democratic candidates, and that would all be cut off. So, are we stuck waiting until we can free the voting database? Or you get someone like, China, who hacked Solar Winds, and they just managed to get in a bad update on some of these systems. So
Mhm.
now, what does that look like? Does that mean that they have the ability to change records in a database?
Maybe.
And what
There's a
and what proof do you have? And what proof do you have that you voted a specific way?
That's right. Good
And
point.
so there's so like, I can see all of these fail points.
Mhm.
Whereas if you have a ballot, and depending on the place, you get a printout of how you voted. So they've got the ballot, you keep your printout. If there's any question about how you voted, you have a printout to say this was my final vote.
Yeah, there you go. See, Sheldon
And
Richardson, my request for $1.9 billion to create a infrastructure for a voting app. It's right here. We're working it out. So just go ahead and send the money and we'll figure it out in the next 10 years. Okay?
there you go. So it's one of those things where, like, I get why people want to do the quick and easy way of
Mm-hmm.
voting online, because you couldn't do it. There's no question as to whether or not you can do it. You absolutely can. It's just that there's a lot of things that you would have to sacrifice, and in the end, there is almost zero guarantee of any type of security whatsoever. Because, having worked in infosec, things are only as secure as what you know about,
Yeah, that's for
and a
sure.
lot of it is reactionary.
Everything is reactionary. That's how we live our lives. We don't prepare to protect. We just react.
Right. So so as much as I would love the convenience of a voting app,
Hmm.
the security of it just isn't there, and it
Right. I
won't be
get it.
there.
I
Not
get it.
not for a very, very, very long time.
That's fine. But at least what I find fascinating is that we have these random talks, and then I hear about them in the ether. You know what I mean? Like, and sometimes I think to myself, who's listening to us? You know, like, because they talk about stuff we
The
talk about.
CIA, the CIA is
Yes,
listening to us.
that's so funny. Like when I downloaded the Helsinki summit, like,
Hmm.
and then the White House they deleted it and then put up an edited version. And it's so funny because the FBI was outside of my apartment for like 2 weeks, and everybody in the neighborhood, because I lived in a mostly minority neighborhood, they knew it was cops, and I didn't even think about it. And they finally came and knocked on my door because I never leave my apartment. And they were like, "Hey, we want to talk to you about this. You stole that." And I was like, "I didn't steal it." And they were like, "Can you take it down?" I was like, "No, it's my property. You, as the federal government, you created it. It's mine now."
Right.
But I love that. It's my story. The FBI came and visited me. So I'm always wondering if I'm still being monitored.
Oh, pfft, there's no question. There's
Yeah.
no question. You know, I mean, there was like I was asked about whether or not like oh, there was one time where I was getting a background check done, and they're like, okay, background checks typically take a few days, and bloop, oh,
Mm,
your background check's done. Yep. Wait, you worked for the feds?
mm,
Yep.
yep.
So all your information. Yep.
Oh, so you're a plant. You're the
To-
mole. You're the one monitoring me.
totally, Jason. I've had my eyes on you for a long time. I've been looking
Ooh.
at you while you're in the show. I mean, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah. That's so funny. I have this like bottle of soap in the shower that's really a camera, and I just left it in there, and I've been getting like hours of just footage, just Wi-Fi'd to my app that I didn't even know I had. So for the past 6 months, I've been recording every shower incident ever in my bathroom.
Yeah, and you can find that all on onlyjasons.com.
LonelyJasons.com. That's hilarious. Lonelyfans.com. I love it.
What
So so I had a real issue this week, Jeffrey.
do you got?
Jujutsu Kaisen was only only one season?
Hmm.
What the fuck? There was like 40 episodes in there, but it was just one season, and then all of a sudden it was just this hard cold stop.
Hmm.
Bugs me.
I know it's anime, man. It's always the rough part about what happened there. You just get
You like that?
completely.
I was just gonna say, you have what in your shower?
Sorry.
A giant shampoo-sized dildo.
Yeah, no, it's just one of those pen cameras you put in a. I had a friend staying over, and she was attractive, so I got this camera. You know what I mean? I just didn't
Yeah,
realize I left it on. That's all.
yeah, and you can pick yours up at PenIslandCameras.com.
Yeah. he, my friend is only like a part of half of the conversation, which I think is so funny. He doesn't know what you're saying. He only knows what I'm saying.
Well, what can I say? It's
Yeah.
it's always fun.
All right. So
But
what should we watch? I mean, yeah. Did you want to
ooh,
talk more about Jujutsu Kaisen?
I haven't seen enough of it yet. I've been so busy that I need to catch up.
I gotcha.
No, what I'm hoping is I was going to sit down and watch Army of the Dead because I need to
Ooh,
see that.
what's that? Tell me.
Zack Snyder did a zombie movie, and it just made it to Netflix yesterday, I believe.
Wow.
So I mean, I love me a good zombie movie, and I just need to sit down and watch it, and I think that's what I'm going to do this afternoon
I love
since
that.
I got the house to myself minus the bish over here.
I love
So
that.
we're gonna watch we're gonna watch a zombie movie, isn't that right? Huh,
One of my
sweetie?
favorite binges is Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead. I love those.
Shaun of the Dead. Wait.
Shaun of the Dead, yeah. And I really loved the one with Brad Pitt in it. I can't remember what it was, but
World War Z.
World War Z. But I cannot get into Walking Dead. Why
Eh,
is that? I love zombie movies, but I hate The Walking Dead.
I couldn't get into it either. I don't know.
Okay.
I couldn't get into it either. It was too much drama for me, I suppose.
It's hard to say. Yeah, it's just hard to say what it was.
Whereas, like, 28 days later, it's
Mm,
just, whoo, that one
right.
was good. I
I,
loved that one.
I love Sandra Bullock in a rehab movie. You know what I mean?
That's what I was saying. It was like, the sequel doesn't make any sense. I said that to Debbie, and they looked at me and they're like, "Are you fucking stupid?" And then that's when they realized that I was being an asshole.
Yes, most people don't realize that. But I get it. I get it.
Yeah, because you got 28 days, 28 days later, and then 28 weeks later. I'm like, one of these movies doesn't seem to fit here. How the hell did this turn into a zombie movie?
So our recommendation is just any zombie movie. Go watch
Zombie
a zombie
movies.
movie. I love it.
Because one of my favorite things is that when planners are trying to figure out how to act in natural disasters, they
Mm-hmm.
use zombies.
Right.
Like the army, when they're coming up with like how would they work in specific settings, they actually use a zombie outbreak. And the funny thing is that it turns out that when you're thinking about, well, if this invasion happens or this disease happens or this bomb goes off, it's like you
Mm-hmm.
have these very rigid set of constraints that your brain is kind of already set into thinking. But
Right.
suddenly it's like zombies, and you're like, well, this isn't real, so fuck it, let's just see what happens. And then they actually come up with some really good stuff because you don't have all of these constraints subconsciously put on you in terms of how you figure out a solution.
That's right. And a lot of people said that like the zombie games where you kill a zombie, just decentralizes the humanity of it, and it allows people to just learn how to kill without putting a human face to it.
Nah, I don't
Mm-hmm.
believe that
Yeah.
for a second.
We're radicalizing all of our kids with zombie games. I love you,
Or
Jeffrey.
or here's what I say is if you don't want to desensitize your kids to, hey, knock it off. Damn dog's trying to bite an eraser.
Hmm.
If you don't want to desensitize your kids to killing things, maybe you shouldn't buy your kids the mature rated games.
Fuck yeah.
That's on you.
That's
Like,
on you.
there is no rule that says that your kid has to get the gory game
That's right. Be a
just
better
because they're,
parent.
yeah, that's on you. Like, I didn't let my kids play shooter games for a long time,
Hmm.
simply
Makes
because I
sense.
wanted to instill in them the idea that you kill somebody, it's final. There's no respawn.
That's right. Fuck, I feel bad for your kids. So they've never played Dunk Hunt.
Well, I didn't have a Nintendo to play Duck Hunt. And besides, everybody got frustrated and tried to shoot the damn dog.
That makes sense. Me too. Well, I love you, Jeffrey. We're gonna end it
Love
right
you too.
there. Thank you. Go enjoy your day.